Previously on Gears.
For Daisy's Double D's, who were on magnificent form last night, by the way.
Weekdays from 12 to 2 p.m. Central African Time.
Beautiful.
Gears with Sasha Martinengo.
How am I supposed to?
Balls.co.za.
How am I supposed to now concentrate after a comment like
Did you
that?
get the
Well,
Did you get the puppies out?
Supposed to concentrate.
Listen, those puppies were out last
Oh, really?
night, buddy.
Were they having a fiesta all by
Yeah,
themselves?
they were having a
wow.
I had people coming up to me going, she must have a really good surgeon. I say, well, as far as I know, those are hers. Anyway, listen, time for Daisy's Double D's, and let's get into it.
Oh, okay. Today on my Daisy's Double D's, we are chatting about the legal side of social media, and we'll find out what we are able to do and not able to do thanks to Emma Sadleir. Emma is a media law consultant and speaker based in Johannesburg. Her areas of expertise include all aspects of print and electronic media law, with a particular focus on social media law. She's very intelligent. She has a BA LLB with distinction from the University of Witwatersrand and an LLM in Information Technology, Media and Communications Law from the London School of Economics, having been awarded a scholarship from the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust to study abroad. Emma does a lot of work with schools, educating parents and pupils on the responsible use of social media. And she's in studio with us today. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming through. I'm so glad you're here because there was like something blew up a couple of months ago on social media, and all of a sudden that's where I sort of found out a little bit about you because, and then I was worried to follow you or unfollow you because I was like, what if we say something naughty? Will
Big Brother's
Emma
watching you, baby.
Yeah.
Emma come and shout at us.
The self-styled boss of Twitter rules.
Oh, really? Is that your new kind of tagline?
Well, you know, I got back from London and I found to my dismay that I had been deactivated from accessing all social media sites at the law firm where I worked. So I phoned IT and I
like
said...
worked. Yeah, yes.
I left a couple of months ago to go on my own. I'm still very good friends with them, though. And I phoned IT and I said, this is absolutely unacceptable because I am a social media lawyer. So I need to get onto social media. So that was where the idea developed.
Wow.
And since then, there's just an absolutely massive market for it. It's crosses, you know, employment law, publication laws, anything to do with defamation, hate speech. It's got a huge impact in schools where we've got a crisis. Social media, you know, all these kids have access to Facebook and Twitter. They're using them, Instagram, Snapchat, and there's a cyberbullying and pornography crisis.
You know, I'm so glad you brought that up. Bullying is a massive problem that we have, and people don't really understand the ramifications and the effect it has on people going through all of their lives. So how do you get involved with schools and do you educate the kids what to do, or what is your line with them?
I think a lot of it is educational. Look, bullying is not new. It's always happened. Now we've just given people a new forum, and the pity is that it's public. So what was really mortifying before, if somebody bullied you in a private space, is even more mortifying now because it all takes place in public. That can be good as well because it means that the school authorities, parents, etc., there's often a sort of a paper trail. I tell these children when I'm educating them that what you put on the internet is like a tattoo. It's very, very difficult to get it removed. And we see that with criminals busting themselves by documenting what they've done on Facebook and Twitter. You know, people are often proud of their stupidity.
It's
So
hysterical.
It is absolutely. I mean, it sort of acts as a CCTV camera for the police, and the police use it a lot. I've been working with the police, working out the best ways to use social media to track down criminals and to detect crimes. So for teaching school children, it's really just, you know, as I say to them sometimes, I remember once being told by a drug awareness coach at school that he was high on heroin and tried to peel himself like an orange, and that absolutely terrified me, and I've never tried drugs. So it's the same sort of thing. It's giving them these sort of shock examples of where people have been expelled, where they've gone to jail, and it's happening more and more often. And you know, children, just because they're under the age of 18, they still have criminal capacity. They are able legally to commit crimes. So these include sexual offences, they include harassment. There's a new piece of legislation in South Africa called the Protection from Harassment Act. It's also referred colloquially as the cyberbullying legislation. And that allows people, even children, to get protection orders against each other to stop this electronic harassment, because the definition of harassment now extends to persistent electronic communication.
Can I ask how easy it is to get that order passed? How do you go about doing that?
You know, it's quite easy. So before, you could go to court if you had been in a domestic relationship with somebody to get a protection order against them.
Yeah.
Now you can go and get a protection order against anybody, even people you don't know. And then all the networks, the cell phone providers, have to help you to try and find out who this person is.
So you
that
can
they serve the
literally walk into the court
Yeah, so
and
you
go,
go to
I need
court
someone to help
and
me.
you can do it ex parte, which is a stupid legal term for meaning you don't have to notify anybody about, you don't have to notify the other side. You can do it on an urgent basis, and it's in the magistrate's court, so it's quite cheap. And there are a lot of people, sort of, because it's new legislation, so there are a lot of sympathetic lawyers out there wanting to get experience, and they are willing to act pro bono. So there's a lot of development in the field. I think in South Africa, the most development we've seen is in the hate speech arena. We've had massive examples of that this week and sort of in the last couple of years, where there have been complaints laid to the Human Rights Commission. And then in the employment sphere, people getting dismissed because of what they say online.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up a couple of things here, because I want to understand a couple of things like the definition of offensive. But let's get to the FHM thing that happened over the last week, which is, I mean, it's sick more than anything else. You know, you're dealing with something that's very, very serious in this country, all around the world, and that is rape. And then these guys go out and are stupid with what they actually say. Now, you've got to look at it from two ways. Yes, they work for a company, so that a company all of a sudden gets implicated, and from there the company gets pressure to make a stand on it. But as individuals, can somebody have legally do anything to them as an individual?
You know, there could be complaints laid at the Human Rights Commission against them personally under the Equality Act. So if they could show that it falls within the definition of hate speech, then certainly complaints could be laid. But, you know, the CCMA has been absolutely consistent that if you bring your employer into disrepute by your conduct online, then you can be fired. And so too, if you compromise your employees or your company's suppliers or clients, or you just in general breach the duty of good faith which you owe to your company, then you can be fired. And the CCMA has heard countless cases and held the same in every one.
If, for example, somebody in their bio says, "Hi, I'm F1 Sasha, blah, these tweets are my own."
Yeah. So
does that have any standing?
No, it doesn't. I think that I'm really not a fan of these sort of caveats. I tweet in my personal capacity, that kind of thing, because I think firstly it emboldens people to say a lot more robust things than they probably would. But, you know, the rule is always, if you wouldn't go on the radio and say it, if you wouldn't...
Oh, that's dangerous, because I say a lot on the radio.
You see, we're internet radio.
Exactly. But you know, it's as long as you can be associated with the company that you work for, then the potential exists for you to bring them into disrepute, regardless of what, you know, disclaimers you have in your bio. If I can be recognized as an employer of my company, then the potential exists for me to bring them into disrepute.
What is the definition? Okay, now you've mentioned hate speech.
Yes.
Okay, so I assume offensive is very much aligned to something like hate speech.
Well, I think hate speech is probably a lot more than just offensive. The way that it's defined in the Constitution is very, very, it's a very, very high par to reach.
Okay.
It basically says that an incitement to harm, you know, racial violence, those kind of things all fall within the definition in the Constitution. But then we have an inconsistency because there's the Equality Act, which is sort of what the Human Rights Commission upholds. And that says that where you hurtful speech, harmful speech, all that kind of stuff falls within the definition of hate speech. So there was actually going to be, after the Julius Malema hate speech case last year, it was going to go to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And unfortunately it was settled, because what we really wanted from that case was direction from the Supreme Court of Appeal to tell us what is hate speech. We don't actually know what hate speech is. So yes, you know, it's like a judge who said that he knows pornography when he looks at it. You know, it's a very difficult line to draw, and it has to be determined, I guess, on a case-by-case basis.
So let's look at social media and Facebook. I'm going to go more on the Twitter side of things, because it's just simpler, and you got a short amount of characters to offend somebody quite easily.
Yeah.
If, for example, I go on and tweet and I say, ENF is a doers.
I'd
We
reply
love
and
you,
say,
Ian.
so are you.
Yeah, but
Well, you know,
or I said the president,
Yeah.
or the minister of this,
Yeah.
or a high-profile sports person.
Yeah, I mean, freedom of speech is an absolutely fundamental imperative
Yeah.
in the Constitution of South Africa. There's no question there. So everybody has a right to freedom of expression, but that right must be balanced against other rights. For example, rights to defamation, to reputation, dignity,
Yes.
privacy. So it's a balancing act that needs to happen in each instance. But you know, if you call Ian a doers, you could probably say, well, it's fair comment. And the Constitution allows you to be very.
She agreed. She agreed. Did you hear that?
I agreed as well.
You've now been called a doers twice. And
This is
once
true.
by a high-powered lawyer.
Listen, I know a lawyer, a very
pretty-
good one as well. So stand by, but
Okay. No, it's just, I mean, it is.
Yeah, so sorry. I just want to
Yeah,
clarify
sorry.
this because I do a lot of this educational work, and a lot of people sort of come out of my talks thinking, "Oh my God, we're not going to say anything," and that's really not the message that I want to give. You know, there's no censorship here. I really style myself as a huge advocate of freedom of expression. It's just got to be used responsibly. So as long as you are not motivated by malice in your content that you put online, as long as it's an honestly held opinion, then you can be very, very extreme in your views.
It's a very, yeah, I think that's because I remember when you first came online and I got notice of you, and I became petrified. I was like, oh my God, this woman's going to come and close
Yeah,
us
yeah,
down. You're not allowed to do anything.
can I ask a question?
No.
Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Let's just reverse the roles. I was in a situation a while ago where the company that I was working for sent out a memo, and the memo said, you may not tweet or Facebook or anything else on social media about a particular subject. This is the policy, therefore you will wait until we allow you to do so. My question is, first of all, let's not get into the whole you're going to get fired thing, but first of all, is that enforceable?
Yeah.
And secondly, what should somebody in that situation do who works for a company who enforces that?
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult
Great
line
question.
to straddle the sort of personal-professional
Yeah.
divide, because I think we all sort of feel intrinsically that we have a right to be on these forums. And actually, the United Nations last year passed a declaration saying that it's a fundamental human right to access the internet. Now, whether that translates to having a Facebook account and a Twitter account and being able to air your views, I don't think so. I think that's a step too far. So where an employer sends out a very specific instruction not to provide comments to the media or upload on Facebook or tweet about a certain matter, if you don't listen to that instruction, provided it's a sort of a lawful instruction and it's not too extreme, then it would be insubordination if you failed to listen to it. So it is tricky, and you know, employers, we're all trying to deal with this at the same time. This is very new stuff, and what the law is telling us to do is to apply existing laws to this very new forum. Now, sometimes that's hopelessly
Sure.
inadequate. If you think of the Copyright Act, which is a 1970s piece of legislation, how can we possibly apply those kind of rules to how we're communicating now? So I think that people are all sort of grappling with the problem at the same time, and I think employers, initially there was a reactionary approach, you know, sort of shut down everybody, the
Yeah.
potential reputational harm is just too great, and now employers are starting to embrace it and realizing the real value of it and the value of having their employees online and talking and making noise. So I think the rules are starting to change, but you know, if you get a lawful instruction from your employer saying you can't comment about a specific matter, well, then you can't comment about a specific matter.
Yeah,
Fair
because
enough.
you would agree to it. That's why. You know, if you sit there and say, no, I don't agree to it, then they can say, well, then you don't work here anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, there isn't obviously a huge imbalance in the power relationship, which the courts and the
Welcome
CCMA
to broadcasting.
do take into
Yeah.
take into account. But you know, because particularly for people like you guys, you are really the face of the company. So what you say out there is really the company message. So you can understand why employers would want to regulate what you're saying. Obviously, the easiest way of doing it is having a sort of a personal account and a professional account. But the very nature of social media is that you straddle those lines. So you know, I think that it's a negotiation that needs to take place, and I think that the boundaries should be determined up front, because I think every single employer-employee relationship is different. For you guys, it's great that you are online and you're controversial and you're making noise, because that's good for the brand. You know, the most controversial accounts are the most popular ones. So you know, but I think that that's just a discussion that needs to happen up front. I mean, if I tell you some things, you'd be absolutely horrified. For example, employers really staking ownership of their employees' accounts when they leave. which you might be
Wow.
absolutely shocked about. But, when I left my law firm, there's absolutely no doubt that they own the intellectual property to every single piece of work I did while I was there. There's no question about that. But
Yeah.
what if part of my employment was to tweet about a certain matter? For example, when I was to go to court, if I was in charge of a particular account, tweet updates or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Well, then that's quite a specific instruction. It's something I'm doing in the course and scope of my employment. I'm being remunerated for the time that I'm
Correct.
spent using. So it's a debate that needs to happen. So my
Sure.
real view is really just to make sure that there are policies in place that you agree upon beforehand, so that you know where the boundaries are, because what's happening a lot now is that there's this terribly reactionary approach. Companies and employers, and particularly it's because it's a generational thing. A lot of the older guys who are usually the head of these companies don't actually know what's going on these networks. So when they find out, and usually it's a crisis, for example, the FHM thing this week, I would imagine that they didn't have a social media policy in place,
Yeah.
and I would imagine that they really hope
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they
yeah,
did
yeah.
have one. So
Yeah.
so it's just discussions that need to happen up front. There are a lot of really interesting issues. I don't know if you guys know about this concept of vicarious liability, and that's when the employer can be held responsible for what happens, what an employee does during their employment. So, for example, if I have a construction company and I've got one of my drivers out and he has a car crash,
Yeah.
well, then the employer is probably responsible for the damage that gets done. Now, could I be held vicariously liable for the tweets posted by my employee in the course and scope of their employment? It's a very, very big issue. So that's quite fun stuff. Then we've seen a lot of development in the Human Rights Commission, lots of racist stuff. Probably the most high-profile example to date was a guy called Zama Kumalo, who invited all his friends to a big black braai to celebrate the death of whiteness, in commemoration of the Westdene Dam
Yeah, it
disaster.
was horrible.
Yeah, so he was told by the Human Rights Commission that, well, he apologized and he deleted it, and he had to clean the graves of the Westdene Dam victims. So that was quite an interesting sort of restorative justice kind of a
that's-
solution.
I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's really what the Human Rights Commission is tasked with doing, is this sort of restorative justice kind of thing, rather than, I've got a huge problem with if I am defamed by somebody, that they can give me 20,000 rand and that must cure
Yeah,
it.
cure it.
They must apologize, they must retract the comment, and
give
correct
1
correct
million
the
rand.
information. Exactly.
Now listen, we're just about running out of time because
So
we've
interesting.
only paid you for 10 minutes, and we know how
Play the
lawyers
rest in
are.
tequila.
Oh,
Well, we
hey!
do tequila.
You can stay the whole day.
Guys, do you know that I have not asked one question?
I'm sorry, Daisy.
Oh, shame. Did we jump?
No, but you've taken all of them, so don't stress.
I just want to say,
Good.
I think that you are on. If you got the little crosshairs of your target in terms of a booming business, and you put it right in the bullseye, that's where you're at right
Thank
now.
you.
There are
I hope
companies.
so.
There are companies around the world who are literally clamoring, desperately trying to find people who are knowledgeable in social media, both in law and in growing this unknown entity, which we're all kind of fiddling around in the dark with, going, what do we do? What do we do? And
Yeah.
and
And
you
you know-
creating the precedent.
you're doing
I'm
amazing work.
creating the noise. So I can just tell you briefly before we finish, and that is that it's a real marketing issue so far.
Yes.
But it's becoming a boardroom issue. If we think about the new act which came into effect last month, dealing with financial markets and listed companies in particular. Now there's an insider trading offence in there, which basically means that if I've got a friend who works for a listed company, of which there are obviously many, so probably a good percentage of my friends, went onto Facebook and said, yes, we're getting our bonuses because we've made our budget. Whoo, drinks on me. That is an offence. That is an insider trading offence, because that is market sensitive information
Correct.
being disclosed not via the correct channels. And if I'm told that I'm getting a bonus, well, then I want to tweet about it. But it's really it's absolutely crucial that employers start dealing with these issues, educating their employees, because journalists who publish in newspapers and you guys who are sort of part of the traditional media are aware that there are limits to your freedom of
Yeah.
expression, but the average man on the street doesn't.
Well, you
That's
see,
hectic.
now the whole thing about it is that besides stupid people, the message to people is you've got to, if you're tweeting about, oh my word, I'm going to gym, that's all fine. But if you're going to tweet about something that's happening in your office, or my boss is driving me mad and I hate him and I want to kill him, or something like that, you could well be in some serious trouble. So
Serious trouble.
what's your message to the average Twitter person who has a lot of fun on there but sometimes goes off the handle?
Yeah, I think that because these things are so specific to what industry you're in, who your employer is, the question you need to ask yourself is there any restriction on me in the real world? If so, that restriction would translate to my conduct online. So if there's a code of conduct regulating my conduct at the workplace which says that I can't call my colleague a bitch, well then I can't call her a bitch online. If I am part of a specific regulated industry, for example the financial industry, or for me it's the Law Society, if the Law Society would prevent me from doing it, well then I shouldn't be doing it online. So it's a very obvious point, but any legal, ethical, contractual obligations which apply to you in the real world apply equally to your conduct online.
Sorry, last one. This is the last one. And I've seen this happen often.
Yeah.
And I do have sometimes a lot of empathy and a lot of sympathy for big, giant companies. At times I also want to wring their neck, but at times I do feel sympathy. For example, I've got my phone and all of a sudden it doesn't work and I go mad and I rant. It's an angry tweet. Okay. But it's now, sort of defaming this massive big company because now I've got the right to attack them. But they can't really come back and sit there and say, you're just a stupid person. How are these big companies now trying to deal with the damage that can be done via social networks?
Well, they have armies employed where they try and respond to comments on social media. They have... and also, I mean, just going back onto why it's become a boardroom issue, if we look at the Australian Stock Exchange, they've just updated their guidelines where they say there is a duty on all listed companies to monitor what's being said about their companies on all social channels to make sure that everybody is trading off level. But back on your sort of reputational question, the law allows you to give reviews. If you think the historical example would be a restaurant review, you went to a restaurant, you came back, you write a report, and it's scathing. It's a vicious, vitriolic attack about how dreadful your meal was, but it's totally protected, provided it's an honest opinion, not motivated by malice. Because as soon as there's malice, it negates the defense. So I always say to people, don't tweet in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
In the old days, if I wanted something published on a public platform, then I'd have to write a letter to the editor of a newspaper.
Correct.
That was really the only way, or phone into a radio station.
And hope that somebody actually
and hope
publishes
that I had a
it.
sympathetic ear.
Yeah.
And but during that time of actually getting that letter to the editor, there's a lot of time for reflection.
Count to
Correct.
10, bite your tongue, count to
Exactly.
10.
Whereas
Yep.
now I can pick it up, tweet it, and it's gone. And there was somebody dismissed in the States this year, worked on Capitol Hill. He tweeted something, thought better of it, deleted it after 14 seconds. 14 seconds. Fired. It's that quick. So as soon as you put out there, you can't bring it back. You can delete it, but it'll be cached. And as soon as one other person's retweeted it, it's in the abyss.
Well, you see now, Emma, you're scaring our listeners.
I'm sorry about that.
Gerard says, I won't tweet you guys ever again. They might come and lock me up.
No, but it's so interesting.
Fascinating stuff. Listen, people are really, really responding
Yeah,
and
there's
really
lots of
enjoying
response, yeah.
enjoying your talk. So we really appreciate it. We can't pay you. But we really appreciate you coming in and just clarifying so many of these issues that I think, at least I've got some kind of clarity as to who and what I can say about people.
Yeah, in particular.
Hey. No, it's awesome. Thanks so much for your
Absolute
time.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And stick around. We'll pour you a tequila.
Weekdays from 12 to 2 p.m. Central African Time.
Beautiful.
Gears with Sasha Martinengo on bulls.co.za.